But again, in this world where you have to grab a greater share of pie within a newer set of customers, or continue to make your current products I would say continue to be on the loyalty spectrum with your current customers, is where you have to get from a system of record to a system of intelligence. And the means and that is why payments foundation models are super important, because they are the bridge between that system of record to system of intelligence.
Hello, and welcome back to the Payment Expert Podcast, your source for the latest news, insights, and analysis on the payments industry. I'm Lewis Thompsett, news editor at Payment Expert, and joining me today, I'm delighted to have Pahal Patangia, head of global industry business development for payments at NVIDIA. Pahal, thank you very much for joining me on today's show.
Thanks for having me, Lewis. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great stuff. Let's get into it then. Let's talk about, obviously, Stripe and MasterCard. They've launched new payment foundation models. They were both built with NVIDIA. What do those models sort of actually look like, and what can they deliver that wasn't perhaps possible before?
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the hottest topics that are happening in the payments world right now. And if you take a step back and think about financial services in general, the industry has been heavily laden with tabular style data, relational style databases all this while, and so far to make sense out of data and to get to get predictions for downstream tasks out of that data is where you would have required machine learning algorithms, and that was the state of the art. The industry was doing fantastic with it, and only very recently, with all the developments that have been shaping in the world of generative AI and large language models, etc., there's this emergence of transformer architecture, which is like a deep learning, I would say, paradigm that is very well suited to be learning patterns from sequences. Anything that has like a sequential nature to it could be encoded through the transformer architecture. And then you're applying that to the text domain, you're applying that to the videos and the images domain, and it turns out, thanks to the work that is being done by the academia and industry, that you could apply that transformer architecture and the ability to learn sequences and patterns, say over time, apply to tabular data as well. And what happens at the culmination of both the spectrums, that is tabular data combined with transformers, is that you are able to build what I call contextual representations, or what somebody would technically call embeddings, that come out of it. Now these embeddings would compose everything about a customer's behavior, when it comes to what the customer likes versus what kind of games or sports did the customer play back in the past versus today, versus what the customer will do next. So when you think about that holistic view of a customer, think 360 degree. Every enterprise, every payments company, every banking institution is kind of racing towards getting that full view. Because at the end of the day, if you know your customer better, you're able to sell better, you're able to, get the right facing, right catered products in front of the customer. And that's the whole pursuit, and that's where the whole industry is heading. To understand anything and everything they can about the customer, and the means to do that is these payments foundation models, tabular transformer architectures, etc. And that's where you see recent announcements and the work which we have been doing with the likes of Revolut, with the likes of MasterCard. All of them, presented at our GTC conference, which happened earlier in the year in March. And since then, we have seen great momentum in the industry coming in from the likes of Plaid, coming in from the likes of other payment customers who have like kind of doubled down on this horizon. So that's the holy grail. And then there are like great components of NVIDIA's platform being involved as a part of it. If you think about it, as NVIDIA as a full stack computing platform company, people think of us as like the hardware play, but what's lost in that narrative is that that hardware is increasingly supported by the software that goes beyond it. And these softwares are libraries which helps you train these models better and effectively. And similarly, such libraries are being used in the development of payment foundation models.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it used to be for years, didn't it, that, whoever held the most transaction data, they were the winners. But as data sharing has improved, and I suppose the understanding of the value of data sharing has increased, I suppose the advantage has moved forward to, who can best interrogate that data, who can best understand that data, who can derive the most value and generate the most value out of that data.
100%. And rightfully so, because if you think about it, just a typical transaction funnel, there are like different players who would touch certain kinds of data. And for a certain transaction, the transaction would flow through different entities, I would say, be it the acquirers, be it the card networks, be it the issuers, etc. And what happens in the process is that like everybody has some sort of data at scale, and they combine that with their own proprietary information which they have about that particular transaction or entity. So the differentiation at times, to your point, even when in the world of open banking, etc., is not at the rails level. The rails were already developed, and data was flowing through them, and transactions were flowing through them, and business was going great. But again, in this world where you have to grab a greater share of pie within a newer set of customers, or continue to make your current products I would say continue to be on the loyalty spectrum with your current customers, is where you have to get from a system of record to a system of intelligence. And the means and that is why payments foundation models are super important, because they are the bridge between that system of record to system of intelligence. How do you build that semantic layer of understanding? How do you build that behavioral encoding of customers at the end of the day, so that you are not just sitting at the data layer, which by itself means nothing, but rather you sit on the insights layer, you sit on the actionable layer. So data layer is very reactive, I would say, and the insights layer or the intelligence layer is where the action happens, because then you could take it to downstream use cases, be it your fraud or your dispute predictions or your cross selling, etc. All of them come into play.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I suppose perhaps a different kind of intelligence, but one that's coming to the fore at the minute is agentic commerce, and it's much discussed too, moving into sort of live production and pilots on the way. But I suppose the infrastructure behind that you've spoken about so well was almost built for humans. All the logins, the onboarding, the authorization flows, etc., was built with humans in mind, not for agents. And I suppose today there are competing protocols, different card networks engaged in the space, all trying to solve agentic commerce at once. As of yet, there's no perhaps standardization. Do you think one of the problems that has to be solved first from your perspective? What do you think needs to be the things ironed out before obviously agentic commerce moves into sort of full scale implementation across the commercial world?
Yeah. If you think from our perspective and zoom out a little bit, there's and then we think about what what do we do as a company which we are best at.
Mm.
And I think from first principles, we are a full stack computing platform company that would provide you the infrastructure, tools, and the libraries to do X. X being the realm of agentic commerce here. Now, who would help build those layers of X are the different ecosystem players in the payments community. And that could be the networks, that could be the startups, companies coming with protocols, everything who participates in that, in the vicinity of things, right? So as we are seeing the convergence, of different layers and where value accrues, I think the biggest near term thing where we are continuing to build a position of value is in the fact that if you think about agents and agents taking actions on your behalf, let's not even talk about shopping for that matter, but any action on your behalf, an agent should know what do you want. And the only means for agent to know what do you want is to know you better. The means to know you better is again payments foundation models. What happens is that the embeddings and the contextual representations which I've been talking about that come out of payments foundation models have the right context about you. They have the right, I would say, caricature built in terms of one customer, one persona, and then when agents have to take action on your behalf, and you could put shopping in this context, yeah, they would actually grab that contextual representation and learn what exactly would you like and then shape their action accordingly. This shaping coming in from foundation models, the payments foundation models, and converting into action on the agentic commerce side is a phenomenon which isn't discussed yet in the industry. And that will continuously become important as agentic commerce goes at scale. Because we are talking about autonomy, which means that for autonomy to succeed, the level of personalization needs to be at the highest level.
Yeah.
And that will only come through these payments foundation models. So in effect, payments foundation models and agentic commerce are like a flywheel to one another. Payments foundation model will feed into agentic commerce, and the feedback loop as a result of that action would again go back into improving these models better. And it goes like a 360-degree loop.
Yeah, very interesting stuff, Pal. So I suppose the autonomy comes from that higher level of personalization that you allude to, and by having that higher level of personalization that the agent can offer through those payment foundation models, you I suppose get that. I mean, the question I have for you off the back of that really is, I suppose when an AI agent initiates a transaction and it goes maybe slightly wrong, perhaps it doesn't have the level of personalization as you would put it that is required. I suppose the question there is about liability. I suppose regulators are pointing out, who has the liability if it goes wrong? Does it fall on the consumer? Does it fall on whoever deployed that agent in that the consumer has used? How does payment infrastructure sort of need to be built to make that assignable in practice? Do you think it's just about getting those levels of personalization as high as possible so that doesn't happen?
Yeah, no, I think that answer unpacks into a few facets, I would say, and first is like, uh, begins on the personalization front to be at the lowest level. Uh, I would give one example coming in from, uh, you know, you know, uh, like first let's talk about like being rogue at the most basic level would be that you have given a certain task and then it is performing totally orthogonally to that task, right? And the means to do that, the means for that realignment lies in the piece of personalization. Like this is the kind of work which we're doing with the likes of PayPal, for example. So PayPal has been building an agentic commerce platform where they are rolling out these capabilities to the ecosystem of 19 million SMBs. Now, to do that at scale, with the latency and cost effectiveness they need, is where they have resorted to leveraging open source models like what we produce called NVIDIA Nemotron, and primarily solving the search part of the agentic commerce piece. Now, this has been solved over the years with recommender systems and all the work that consumer internet marketplaces have been doing, and we have reaped the benefits of it. But the bigger picture here is now that if we have better algorithms that are able to align better, that are able to personalize better, that are able to search better, in terms of multimodalities like your text, images, videos combined, and get you that particular SKU into your chat or whatever interface you are in, thanks to them being fine-tuned better. So the combination of open source models fine-tuned with your data is getting you to a level which is as good as the best of the best models there, at the same time being cost effective and latency sensitive as well. And when you do that, you are hitting that personalization check mark, if you will, to put it very simply. Now the other piece is, we as an industry need to solve, and the whole idea of KYA becomes super important. Of course, we as an industry have solved KYC and KYB, and if you think about it, if you break that, the underlying layers have always have been rooted on, number one, data, number two, what algorithms you apply on that. So data plus deep learning, data plus machine learning has been the crux of how we have solved KYB and KYC. And our belief is that a similar process will happen in the KYA world as well, in terms of how different data points, etc., would be leveraged to find out whether this agent is anomalous or not. And that would require a certain level of modeling, that would require a certain level of, in the machine learning language, anomaly detection process to be developed, and that will be like a fundamental base ground for anyone to go and test out agents in the wild. And the ecosystem has been doing a lot of good work. There've been few frameworks here and there. The other day, I was talking to folks at Experian who were talking about their KYA framework, and there are like really good startups in the ecosystem who have been contributing to this space. So I'm really looking forward to what's coming next. But again, all of them would require data and deep learning, and that's where NVIDIA would continue to play a role.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the KYA element is a big talking point, and once that's kind of achieved or reached, then I suppose those agentic models will start to sort of really flourish in the market today. I want to pick up a bit on what you mentioned about those open source models, because they are sort of reshaping, I suppose, the competitive dynamic that we see in financial services. I think NVIDIA's own research points to that. Do you think that accelerates the adoption of it, or does it sort of create risks that perhaps government teams aren't ready for? I know historically financial institutions like to conserve their data, but the value of open source model, and I suppose the cost effectiveness of open source models, is a benefit that many are starting to realize.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to be very clear, we are agnostic of what our end customers and partners use. If they want to leverage the best of the closed source foundation models, definitely we would encourage them to do so, because at the end of the day, those foundation model companies are great partners for us, and we would want to help them propagate into the broader ecosystem. And at the same time, there are cases when financial institutions in particular, don't want to expose their sensitive data, and want to keep them closer to the chest. And then how do they, leverage all the goodness that is coming out of the technology changes? And the answer to that is open source models. That, open source models today, broadly speaking, are like 6 months behind, I would say, to the broader foundation model race. And if you think from that lens, what's required for open source models to be as good is the idea of fine tuning. That when you take open source models, you combine it with your proprietary data. What comes out of it is the is is the product which is totally catered to you. It is proprietary to you, and it composes all your intelligence into that model or whatever offering you are ultimately baking it into. And that level of autonomy is at times desired by financial institutions, and more so is where we are seeing institutions gravitating towards this path. I just mentioned the PayPal example to you. Around March or April earlier this year, Wall Street Journal did an article on how Capital One, BNY, different institutions are resorting to the use of open source models, and largely because they see the value in bringing their own data and combining those proprietary aspects to ultimately make something which is equally or almost as powerful as closed source models, and it helps solve the use case. And then the second thing, other thing to think about it is the world tomorrow would be obviously hybrid. Of course, you are thinking about an agentic first world tomorrow. And if you think about the agentic world, or if you think about the pipelines that go in a typical agent workflow, the you what is an agent? It is actually like a combination of your large language models plus a harness. So the large language models, as we know, they are like, we all know them. And what a harness? A harness is like an orchestrator, and between these two there is a ecosystem of different, I would not say ecosystem, but rather like uh, amalgamation of different processes that go around it. So there's tool calling, and there's some calculations being done, versus there's some search and retrieval, etc. And then ultimately you're reasoning through to either assign to a certain downstream model, or you are doing a certain task. And in the process, what you will see is, in an agentic system, uh, you would require the best and the best models for your reasoning capability, and these could be like closed source models, for example. But at the same time, you would require very small, fine-tuned niche models for performing a certain task where you don't need that big of a model. And 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 that is where the whole concept of like, if you think about what are the recent trends that are happening in the industry, particularly from an AI side of things and large language model side of things, there are two terms which are like popping up. First is the idea of tokenomics, and second is model routing. And these basically sit on that spectrum which I'm talking about, where they will become increasingly important in the world of agents as we go after.
Totally. I'd love to talk to you all day about it, Pahal, but we are nearly out of time. But some fascinating insights. I'll leave you with one last question before we go, which is, if you had to pin, I suppose, a single structural barrier standing today between sort of genuinely autonomous financial services, something to get the agents off the ground, and all the things we've spoken about, and the tokenomic as well, is if there is a one single structural barrier today, what do you think it is?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually not answer in like just one word, but rather I think I
Okay,
think it's because it's a recipe, and
it's
you don't
true.
miss the ingredients in the recipe. So I think like data combined with models combined with infrastructure, combined with talent. I think all four pieces need to come together, and what we see is leading institutions who have been at the top of the game. Think the large banks, the large payment fintechs, large payment institutions. All of them have been acing on these four spectrums, and the ones who have not been who have been behind are actually not the greatest at either of these spectrums, I would say. So that is where the value lies. That is where the competitive edge comes in, and then it reflects into the downstream use cases. As I mentioned, you if you are growth focused, then you are able to personalize better and target better, and ultimately those customers will be coming onto your platform and staying, being sticky. At the same time, if you want to reduce costs, then again, all those pieces, thanks to whatever we are seeing in the world of agents and generative AI, there are enough means to reduce costs as well. So, like, you could optimize for both levers, your profitability or cost reduction, and at the end of the day, it all comes down to those four facets: data, models, infrastructure, and talent.
Absolutely. Pahal, thank you very much for joining us today. Unfortunately, for those listening and watching, that is all we have time for. If you're not already subscribed to the Payment Expert podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you do get your podcasts, with more insight and analysis coming over the weeks and months ahead. And for the latest news as it happens, head over to paymentexpert.com. We'll see you all next time.